Hello and welcome to another episode of It Came From the Page. And I thought I would finish off all of my watch lists for October. These were not very popular videos, so I decided I would not release this on October 31st. I would just give myself the next 3 days to watch whatever I want, and you'll never know about them. So this is the final batch of me reviewing and talking about horror movies. Don't worry, I'll go back to books only soon. They seem to be a much more popular venue for my channel. People just are not that interested in what I had to say about cinema. That's fair. Anyways, since you clicked on this video, you obviously are somewhat interested, so let's get going. Starting off with two Final Destination movies. So I rewatched Final Destination 1 and Final Destination 2. Now, these were like pretty big in the early 2000s. We kind of were getting them pretty frequently for a while, and then they kind of stopped around 2011 or so. So people who are new to the genre might not be as familiar with the Final Destination franchise. Essentially, what happens is a group of people escape death from from a accident, whether that's a plane crash, a bunch of car accidents, or NASCAR race in one of them. And they escape that because one person has like a vision of what's going to happen. And basically, it's kind of a slasher film, but it's really just about death can come for you at any time. So like, there's all these like very elaborate Rube Goldberg-esque traps that they fall into because death has like, oh, it's turned this like knob a little bit, and now there's water and on the floor, and that'll cause you to slip, and then you go, bleh. And so these movies, at least the first one. So the first one is very much focused on that essential subtext in slasher films, especially from the 80s, which was really kind of trying to cope with and examine sudden death, what it means to die in youth, and like the tragedy of that. Now, of course, slashers are just fun movies as well, but there is that kind of extra added layer to it. And yeah, so the first one is amazing. The first one is a really, really good film. I was really surprised by how well it held up. The editing, mwah. Some of the deaths are like, whoa, crazy. And Final Destination 2, I think Final Destination 2 is a pretty fun sequel, and is a lot better than I remembered. I thought this movie was pretty bad originally, but now that I revisited it, I was kind of surprised. I was like, oh, I actually quite enjoy this one. So I'm not sure why I had this negative opinion of it. I probably got it in my head kind of mixed up with Saw 2, because Saw 2, which was released around the same time, completely changed up the editing style, and I hate Saw 2 because of that. Like, I think the editing on the second Saw movies is so bad, because it gets this grimy, gross filter on all of it. But I didn't watch Saw 2, I watched Final Destination 2, and Final Destination 2 held up. It was quite a good time. That opening sequence is truly iconic, and it's truly the thing that's remembered about this, for good reason, because it's just incredibly tense and like harrowing. It's like this freeway crash that involves this logs, and oh my goodness, it's that movie's a lot. So I really enjoyed rewatching both of those. I was thinking about going on to Final Destination 3, but instead I decided another franchise second entry, which was Phantasm 2. If you don't know anything about the Phantasm series, they are very strange. I would say they're almost like if David Lynch created a slasher franchise, because they have a very like dreamlike Lynchian quality to them, mixed with just being very much flat out 80s horror films. So there's like this mixture of like what you expect from a horror film, slasher-esque, because these are not really slashers, because the tall man who's the central villain is not going around like stabbing teens or anything. He's this villain who is robbing graves and repossessing people's souls to work on a alien planet for him. It is very out there. And the second one is basically our lead kid from the first one gets out of an asylum, teams back up with good old Reggie Bannister, and they are kind of on the road for a lot of this movie. traveling towards where they think the tall man is now. And there's just these very interesting shots of these towns that are just hollowed out and abandoned after they've been left to rot after the tall man has come through. And it's very much kind of, it feels like a gradual apocalypse is happening in these movies. And yeah, so I really do like the Phantasm series. And Phantasm 2 is probably the biggest effects of them all, because I think that one has the biggest budget of all the Phantasm movies. But I do enjoy as they go on. The fifth one is a bit iffy, but I felt like rewatching Phantasm 2, and it was well worth rewatching. Next up, I guess I was watching a whole bunch of franchises. I don't know what possessed me, but there's a whole bunch of franchises in this. So I finally watched the newest Paranormal Activity movie, which came out last year on streaming, and that's Paranormal Activity: Next of Kin. Really, I had a really good time with this. I thought the scares were very effective. I thought it was very creepy. I thought it all worked extremely well. I think I'm in the minority, though. I don't think many people like this particular Paranormal Activity movie. In general, I'm not really a big fan of the Paranormal Activity franchise. I really like the third movie and this, but other than that, I'm kind of iffy on most of them. I haven't seen the marked ones yet, and I know the marked ones are supposed to be like the big one. If you've never encountered this franchise, it is a found footage franchise, and this one involves a group of people filming a documentary about a woman finding out where her mother was born, and her mother gave her up as a child. She never knew her mother, so she goes back to this village that we believe might be an Amish village. It appears to be Amish at first. There's more going on there. And yeah, so I really did like this. I found some of these scares really effective and creepy, and I ended up quite liking the characters. I mean, there certainly are plenty of scenes where you're like, don't do that. What are you doing? Go back. Why are you doing this? But, that's kind of the fun of the found footage genre. Unfortunately, the next movie I watched was a movie that I've been kind of wanting to watch for a while, but I've never pressed play, and I wish I had never pressed play. So back in 2016, so I love the streaming service Shudder. I believe it was 2016 when Shudder finally came to Canada, and it had a bunch of original movies on there. Shudder originals now are very different than the original Shudder originals. Because they get pretty big movies now, and they get pretty big directors now for a lot of those originals, and really early on it was very, very indie movies, and a lot of foreign stuff that they distributed in North America under the Shudder label. And so one of them was this movie Therapy, and Therapy has had this very creepy poster image that has always kind of captivated me, in the same way the poster does kind of look like Fear.com, and as a kid I used to be captivated by the Fear.com poster whenever I saw it. That movie is amazingly terrible, but really fun bad. It's bad, but it's fun. Therapy is not. Therapy is a fucking mind-numbingly boring found footage movie with some fairly good creepy sequences where you have this group of kids go into an abandoned asylum. Something else is going on. Wouldn't recommend it. I don't think it's particularly well drawn, and it does have some weird elements of breaking the found footage style, which, to be fair, Paranormal Activity: Next of Kin also broke the rules of found footage once in a while, but I enjoyed those breaks. In this one, they have these interstitial segments between watching more of the clips of this event in this asylum, and they are insufferable. They're not very good. They're not very good at all, and I don't know why you put them in there at all, other than for the ending, but anyway, so it's not good. Never watched Therapy. No one wants to hear me talk about it either. Next up, this one I'm just going to passively mention, because this is probably the only non-horror movie I've watched this month, and that would be Shin Ultraman. If you're wondering how I watched it, continue to wonder, I won't tell you. But if you don't know what Ultraman is a Japanese superhero television series that started in the 60s over in Japan by effects master E.G. Tsuburaya. and it's been going on ever since. There have been gaps. I think in the 90s there's a bit of a gap, but now we still do get constant flows of Ultraman stuff, and the newest version of Ultraman taking off of the kind of the ideas of Shin Godzilla, which was the newest Japanese-made Godzilla movie. This has Shinji Higuchi and Hideki Anno teaming up to retell the story of Ultraman under this Shin umbrella. They're not really related. It's just, they're kind of under the same naming conventions. So I don't like Hideki Anno very much as a creator. I hate Neon Genesis Evangelion. Everyone loves that anime. I absolutely despise that anime for many, many reasons, but I won't get into it here. But and Shin Godzilla is a good movie. I still do have, there is more politically going on there than you would really get from a full understanding if you're just watching it as American. So there is some right-wing politics stuff going on there that you wouldn't really understand unless you are entrenched in Japanese culture. That's a little iffy on that movie. But as a movie, I do enjoy it, and I think it's very fun, and it works pretty well. I'm just always kind of grappling with that. Shin Ultraman, nicely enough, was just a great movie. No weird right-wing-esque elements at all. I think this is a flat out kids movie and would work really well for all ages. I hope that dub becomes out soon for everybody, because I do think if you have young kids, I think you could probably watch Shin Ultraman. And if you watched Shin Ultraman growing up, if you watched Ultraman growing up, you should also watch Shin Ultraman, because I believe you'd enjoy it. Next up, this is a little movie I've seen before, called Extraordinary Tales, and this is a anthology of 5 Edgar Allan Poe stories told through unique styles of animation with unique voices and unique narrators for some of the stories. And they're great. This is a great movie. I really do love this movie. Second time watching this. And it's just a lot of really cool Poe stories told in a very unique and interesting ways. If you're a fan of Edgar Allan Poe, why wouldn't you be? I love Poe. I think he ages extremely well, and he is a great horror creator. And so if you want to kind of revisit some of his stories told in a very unique way, I would definitely recommend this. Extraordinary Tales, very short but very, very good. Next up, so these are the 2 movies I watched yesterday, because I went to the theater to watch 2 movies. Originally, I went to the movie theaters to watch 1 movie, but I got there early enough that I could watch 2 movies. So this is actually the movie I was not intending to see, but had heard some good things about. And this is Smile from 2022. Now, Smile is a movie that has a trailer that looks awful. It looks very, very bad. I had no interest in seeing this, and then a lot of reviews came out, and people were like, no, this is actually good. This is a good movie. And, so I was like, okay. I have an hour before my next movie. I'll go in and sit down and give this movie a chance. And I was completely wrong. Smile was amazing, but I think it's marketed incorrectly, because it is a very, very, very scary movie, but it's very scary because of how it's filmed, what it does, how the camera acts as almost like a character of its own. There's very unique camera angles to here, and it really makes the entire thing extremely tenseful. And it's also a very pointed film about mental health. So if you've ever had a mental health crisis, this movie is very effective at making you relive that in a way that is oh man, I don't know if I'd recommend this to people who have instances of many multiple mental health crises, because it is really good, but it really emulates that feeling, and it's really interesting because it's a very empathetic film about mental health, and it's also very much focused on the society's perception of mental health in a way that I think is really on point and really interesting, and really makes this an effective film. I was terrified by the end of this film. I was on edge, and I was like, oh my goodness. And I went into that, my next movie with that level of like, oh man, I am like pumped to see another movie now, because I am so in to what Smile is laying down. And I was still like, oh my goodness, seeing smiling people like out of the corner of my eyes, like, oh my goodness, seeing them in like dark shapes and stuff. And it was really scary, really effective. So I was at the top of my game to watch the next movie. And the next movie I watched was one of the worst fucking movies I've ever fucking seen. This is Terrifier 2. I hate the original Terrifier. I think the original Terrifier is an awful, misogynistic, shit film. I've literally had friendships dissolve over how much I hate the movie Terrifier. That's a long story, but anyways, it wasn't a big loss. So when Terrifier 2 came out, all these people who I know and who I trust were like, oh, I didn't like movie reviewers that I follow, and then some other horror friends that I have like through I talk to on WhatsApp and stuff like that. So all of these people, they came out and were like, I didn't like the first Terrifier movie, but I really liked Terrifier 2. So I was like, okay, I hated the first Terrifier. I have this thing of like, in every fucking conversation about that stupid ass movie, am I gonna have to then be like, well, I haven't seen Terrifier 2. I can't continue this discussion over how shitty or how good it is. So it kind of felt like this movie was homework anyways. Like, I was like watching this movie so I could have an informed opinion on the movie. Now, of course, you're like, well, that's a lot of negative baggage to bring into a film. To be fair, I had the same negative baggage going into Smile. And I love Smile. And Smile had me teed up at the maximum level of being frightened and being like, I was really, really in the mood to watch another horror movie to continue that like heightened sense of being really terrified. This movie fails on every conceivable level. It is atrociously acted, and I don't blame the actors for that. I think they're being directed to be like that. The kills in this movie are just stupid. They're so stupid. They're all like, oh, this is pushing the bounds of what's acceptable. And it's like, no, this is just like a teenage child. Like, this is a child's view of what is a disturbing film. It's like the same thing about you get with a lot of modern day disturbing media, from like the book perspectives. A lot of these are just like men who have like no emotional maturity, just be like, oh, what's the most fucked up thing we can put? And honestly, it just gets fucking boring after a while, because you're not interesting enough to say anything that's even actually remotely impactful. You're just showing me gross scenes and being like, wow, haven't I pushed the bar? They give fucking Art the Clown a fucking Scrappy-Doo. We have Scrappy-Doo here. And I'm like, this is one of the worst things I've ever seen. He's got this stupid small child who is his like assistant, and she just goes, look at my kid. Here's my stupid grin. She's like, and she's like, and I'm like, I watched a movie where people smiling legitimately disturbed me, and all these stupid characters doing their stupid smiles was so stupid. I hated it. There's like a 15-minute, it feels like a 15-minute dream sequence of what would happen if Art the Clown was running a food truck. I don't care. I do not care. It has some really annoying people playing the banjo, and all these people be like, wow, it's so idyllic. Wow, it's so happy. We're at the Clown Cafe. And then, Art the Clown shows up, and he kills all of us. And you're like, I almost walked out of this movie multiple times, not because I was grossed out to the point of being like, but because I was so bored. It's so boring. It's terrible. It's a bad movie. Don't let any stupid man tell you that this is better than the first movie. They're both trash. Don't watch them. There was one kill that I was disturbed by legitimately, because I do think it gets into the very, very misogynistic thing that the original is very much has in spades. There's a kill that's like way over the top, and in a way that it just like kind of revels in this torture that's happening, in a way that just, again, smart people can do disturbing things well. We've just had, Plagued by Visions himself write a wonderful collection of disturbing stories. And there is like a level of craft and a level of understanding and a level of maturity that comes into that. And this movie has none of it. And it's just this mindless torture of this woman for like, it feels like another 15 minutes. This movie is 2.5 hours long. 2.5 hours long of torture. Of torture. The only person being tortured more than the characters in this movie was me watching this movie. Anyways, do not see Terrifier 2. Why am I doing this? This is getting Trumpian, isn't it? That's bad. Sorry. No more hand signals. The movie sucks. I just did it again. The movie sucks. Don't go see it. I hope I can watch some cool stuff that doesn't suck before the end of Halloween. What have you guys been watching? I hope it wasn't Terrifier 2. And if you had, I'm sorry. And if you have the chance to see Terrifier 2, don't do it. It's one of the worst movies I've ever seen. Goodbye.